Time for another board game review, and this time we have the game. Oh, it's a big boy. Slay the Spire, the board game. This is the collector's edition sent to me by Contention Games and is designed by Gary Dworetsky, Anthony Giovanetti, and Casey Yano. Ooh. Slay the Spire, the board game, is a cooperative deck-building adventure. Craft a unique deck, encounter bizarre creatures, discover relics of immense power, and finally become strong enough to slay the Spire. Let me show you how to play. So Slay the Spire is one of my favorite video games ever, and so a lot of this will be pretty familiar to you if you've played the video game, but if you haven't, basically you are trying to fight your way through 3 acts, and there's a boss at the end of each act. This is a deck building game, so here I have the collector's edition, so I don't know what is included in that and what's not. I assume these mats are not in the regular edition, but just, you know, take that with a grain of salt. But yeah, you got your draw pile, discard pile, your exhaust pile. This is what happens if you exhaust cards. You can't use it for that fight anymore. You get item cards and such. At the beginning of the game, you get a Meow's Blessing. So you got a deck, and this you get these choices. So this Meow's Blessing gets you 3 coins and a card reward. I have the nice metal coins. How card rewards work is your character has a normal card rewards pile and a rare card rewards pile. So for card rewards, you reveal the top 3 cards of your reward deck. These are sleeved, by the way, which is important. You'll see later. And you can choose a card. So let's say I take this card. I would then I would return the other 2 to the bottom of my card reward deck, and this card will be added to my deck. Then I have 3 choices. I pick one. I can either upgrade a card, gain 3 potions, or upgrade 2 random cards, lose 2 HP. Potions are simple items that give you benefits, like this Swift Potion. If you spend it, you can draw 3 cards. This one is an attack potion. The next attack you play this turn is played twice, and goes in a jar. You can't lose more than 1 HP this round. If I wanted to upgrade a card, I can go through my cards and I can upgrade one. Let's say I pick, I'll pick the one I just added to my deck. So you flip it over, you see the green text on the title, and now this card is upgraded because before it was a strength to any player if the die is on 1, 2, or 3, but now the odds are better, 1, 2, 3, or 4. That's why you need the sleeves, because these cards can all be upgraded. Looking at our character board here, this is our energy. Energy is used to play cards. We have our block, that's used to defend against attacks, and HP tracker here. This character, what do you call it again? I'm a fake fan. I always just know them as fighty guy, the Ironclad. So the Ironclad has a special ability, end of combat, heal 1 HP. And let's look at what these cards look like. The top left is the energy cost. You spend your energy to play. So this would cost 1 energy to play. And they do different things like attack, defend. We'll get into that stuff later. There are also items you'll get along the way. Stuff like this pen nib. This is a... we'll go into how these activate. But essentially, this one here can do vulnerable. We'll get into that later. Orichalcum, end of turn 1 defense if you don't have any block. Sundial, when you roll a 2, you gain 2 energy. Looking at this map here, there are a lot of different symbols here. These are randomized at the top of the game. And I'm not gonna go through each of these different spaces right now. Let's just kind of go through how general combat works and how a player turn works. So, in a combat round, this is a 2-player setup. You draw a card for each. Some of them summon enemies, like this red louse. On the bottom, you see it says green louse. You add a green louse to this. And these are the enemies that you have to attack for this round. So, at the start of your turn, you set your energy to 3 and your block to 0. Then, you draw 5 cards. If you ever run out of cards, you shuffle your discard pile, and draw from there. Shuffle your discard pile, make a new deck, draw from there. Classic deck building stuff. There is also no hand size. You also then roll the dice because this will determine if certain items trigger, and or what the monsters are going to do. So I roll a 3. So looking at these monsters, you know that this jaw worm is going to do 2 attack and a block. This one's going to attack for 2, and this one's going to do, what is this status effect called? Weak. And those items I showed you before, that's how these activate. So if I had this pen nib and I roll the 5, then I would, it would activate. So in a 2-player game, or any multiplayer game, you can play cards, use potions, and activate abilities in any order you choose. You can discuss strategy, like which enemies you want to attack, which players need help, how much you can say stuff like, how much damage can you do? Do you have enough block? Communication is important. So, looking at my hand here, I have 3 energy to spend. I could be like, all right, I'm going to spend 2 energy on Bash. That's going to do 2 damage, and that is going to inflict vulnerable. So, let's say I choose the Jaw Worm. So that's 2 damage. I place a vulnerable token. Vulnerable is a status effect that up to 3 tokens, you can do basically extra damage. So when a player with one of these tokens, or when an enemy with one of these tokens is attacked, damage from each hit in the attack is doubled, then the target loses one of those tokens. Then I could use my Spot Weakness skill with my last remaining energy. This is a strength to any player if the die is a 1, 2, 3, or 4. Since the die is on 3, it activates. What a strength token does is it deals 1 damage on each hit for each strength token you have. So it's just extra damage. All these status effects have a max number that they can have. Like strength can have a max of 8 tokens, vulnerable can have a max of 3, so on and so forth. So I'm not going to go through the entire combat round, but when you do your attacks, you can actually choose either row. It doesn't need to be the row that your character is in. The importance of the rows is that these enemies are going to attack that character. So once you both go through all your cards, anything you want to do, then you just discard any cards you played. There are cards that exhaust. Let me see if I can find one. Like this War Cry card. It's draw 2 cards and put a card from your hand on top of your draw pile. It's 0 energy, which is nice, but it is exhausted, so when you use it, it gets placed in your exhaust pile, and you can't use it until the end of the entire fight. Then it goes back into your deck. And then once you clean up, you discard any cards in your hand, and then the enemies will go. Now, just to illustrate how block works, let's say I used 1 block on my character, so I have 1 of those. The enemy is going to attack with the 3 roll, so that's going to be 2 damage, and then it's going to do 1 block. So next turn, it'll be a little more resilient. Enemy block gets removed at the start of an enemy turn, and it would do 2 damage, but since I had a 1 block, it blocks 1 of the damage, and I would take 1 hit. And then these enemies would attack this character. I'm not going to go through all that, right? You get the idea. Now, some enemies have what are called cube actions. So let's say this enemy was in play. What that means is, instead of being determined by die rolls, what they do, they start with this ability. Then at the end of the enemy turn, it'll go down, and that's what it'll do next turn, like that. So that is how combat works. You play your cards, you try to do damage to the enemies. If you kill one, it gets flipped over, it's defeated. If any of your characters die, then the game is instantly over. Well, let's go into how end of combat works. So let's say you successfully defeated these enemies. You get the rewards in the top left. So this one, you get a coin, a potion, and you get to get a card reward, which is you draw 3, pick 1. And this one, 1 coin and a card reward. Once you've gotten your rewards, you return all your cards to your deck. If you had any curse cards or status effect cards, those return to your deck, or to their respective decks. You don't keep them between rounds. Reset your player boards, clear the enemies, and then if you want, you can switch your rows if you would like. The reason why that might be important is because these enemies up here in the higher row attack first, then the lower row. And that's basically the gist. So now let's go into what this map is. So you can see there are different choices and paths you can take. The question mark means it's an event. All you do, you draw a card from the event deck, something happens. Here's Wing Statue. You have the choice to pray, remove a card from your deck, lose 2 HP, or gather gold, gain 2 coins. Each player must choose one of those options. I'll show you a couple others just for fun. Here's a upgrade shrine. You can upgrade a card or sacrifice, upgrade 2 random cards, but lose 2 HP. Or the cleric. You can either pay 1 coin to heal 3, pay 2 coins to upgrade a card, pay 3 to remove a card, or leave and don't do anything. The campfire, this is one. If you go to this token, you have the option to either heal 3 HP or upgrade a card, just like in the video game. If you go onto a treasure space, you get a relic. And I showed some of these before, like Strike Dummy. Your starter strikes deal +1 damage. Oddly Smooth Stone. On a 4, you get 2 block to any player. Tungsten Rod. On a 5, 1 block to all players, or 3 if you're playing solo. There is also a merchant. How the merchant works, I'm just gonna pull this over here. You got this board. You place 3 relics in the store, as well as 3 potions, and you can buy stuff. You can also pay 3 coins to remove a card from your deck, once per player. You can also buy cards. So also each player will reveal the top 3 cards of their reward deck, and depending on the rarity, there are different prices: 2 coins, 3 coins, 6 coins. So also a way you can add some more cards to your deck. There are also elite fights, the ones with the horns on them. So if you go on there, then it's a stronger enemy to fight. And otherwise, you just move on up to the boss, and then the boss will reveal itself, and you hopefully survive. So this is a boss, and the difference between bosses is they are not in their own row. They are treated as being in all rows. Their summons go into rows if they have any. But yeah, so they will attack all players when they attack. And that's pretty much the gist. I mean, you go through, you fight enemies, you get stuff, get better cards. There are 4 different characters, just like in the video game: Ironclad, Defect, the Silent, and the Watcher. They all work in different ways, just like in the game. Other than that, I don't need to go through all the keywords and stuff. There's different status effects, some of them which I mentioned before. There is a Act 2 and Act 3 board that you replace, along with different cards you bring out for each act. Oh, and I should mention there's also some really fun unlockables. So, you can see I've marked some. As you play through the game, you'll unlock more cards for your characters. There's also Ascension, just like in the video game, where it's harder versions of the game you want to try to defeat. There's achievements, but yeah, so it's a game that you play through, and you'll start unlocking better cards, more content as you play. And otherwise, that's pretty much the game. So I'm a huge fan of the video game, and when this was announced, I will admit I was skeptical. Like, how are they gonna make... Okay, printer. Shut the fuck up! So I'm a huge fan of the video game, and when this was announced, I will admit I was skeptical. Like, how are they gonna make all that manageable in a board game format? I gotta say, I am extremely impressed. This game perfectly captures the best aspects of how it feels playing the original video game, but the addition of co-op gives it a very fun, rewarding dynamic. Combat is definitely challenging, but I love how nail-biting it can get. There were definitely some close calls, but it makes it that much more satisfying when you can figure out a way out of a turn. What's smart is that since you know exactly what the enemies are going to do on their turn, it's all about managing damage prevention and choosing which targets to kill. It's a really engaging combat system that I don't think overcomplicates things. Sometimes the status effects can get a little fiddly and certain boss abilities can get a little complicated, but that's something obviously the video game has an advantage over. But because the video game can do all that stuff for you. But if you're playing with people familiar with the game or familiar with deck building board games, I don't think it's too bad. Maybe not for people who like really light games, but I think in that mid range, I didn't think it was too bad. Having sleeves for the card upgrades is a very smart and satisfying way to do them. I also love board games that have an unlocking system, so it encourages you to try different characters and replay the game for more content. Some minor complaints, I think the character boards, they have those HP with the separate squares, like the notches, but the energy and the block don't. I feel like, why not have them all be separate squares? Because those are nice because you're less likely to accidentally nudge the board and move the cubes on accident. Just felt like a little bit like, why not just have them all be notches? I also think this HP tracker for the bosses is clunky. It's hard to not compare this to something like Aeon's End, which has a series of dials that you turn the numbers for the number. That's way easier to read and process. This, especially if it's like over 100 HP, is not easy to look at a glance and go, what's the HP? You gotta go, okay, I gotta add this, and this is just nothing. But very minor complaints, because overall, I really loved this. If you are a fan of the video game, this is an instant recommendation for sure. It really feels like you're playing the original, but it provides enough to make it feel like its own unique experience, especially if you bring in another player. Like, I think for me, I prefer just me and another player, just, working together. I feel like that has a good sort of flow. And that's just a really fun way to play Slay the Spire. Or, if you're someone who just loves co-op deck building games, and if you don't mind a bit of complexity when it comes to managing numbers and statuses and abilities, I also highly recommend it. I think this is a very impressive and very fun package. It's a great implementation of the original video game.